Welcome, guys. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about the age-old debate. Which is better, Star Trek or Star Wars? Now, before I get into this, I'm going to preface that I'm going to be biased, yes, because I'm a human, number one. And number two, it was I grew up on Star Trek. My dad was a big Trekkie. So like I'd seen the TV show, like I think I've seen all three iterations of the TV show. When the movies came out, I saw those. I wasn't until recently that I got into Star Wars. I started watching their old movies, like the old trilogies, the prequels, and then the sequels. I both like Star Trek and Star Wars, but to me, I think Star Trek wins the battle. Like, first off, I'd like to say that both franchises are good in their own right. If you prefer Star Trek, that's your business. If you prefer Star Wars, that's your business. I think both are great franchises, but I think one is more so than the other. So let's get into it. Let me explain why I think Star Trek is better than Star Wars. And before we get into it, please don't be coming at my throat like about Star Trek trivia and stuff. I enjoy the movies and shows, yes, but is it my life? No. Every time I talk about enjoying something that people like dedicate their lives to, they're like quizzing me, and it's like, no, 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 no. I take enjoyment out of it. I enjoy it, but yeah, no, you won't see me, eating dirt for it. You feel me? So if you're in the comments like, oh, what's this fact about Star Trek? Do you know this about Star Wars? I probably don't, because I'm out here living life. So yeah, but now let's get into it. First off, the reason I think Star Trek is better than Star Wars is the cultural impact and inclusivity of it. You're like, Nia, why does this matter? Let me tell you something. I believe Star Trek was the first show ever to incorporate the black woman kissing a white man in any television show during that time. I forgot what series it was, but they were incorporated that, and they were the first ever to do so. Groundbreaking. The fact that when the show started filming, they started filming in 1966. That interracial kiss that happened in 1968. And mind you, civil rights bill happened in 1964. Do you understand that? Integration happened in 1964. The kiss that happened on screen happened in 1968. 4 years after segregation ended. To us, it's like, oh, it's an interracial kiss. That's nice, whatever, yada, yada. But that's groundbreaking. To show a white man and a black woman kissing on screen during that time, people were rolling in their graves everywhere. Like, that was a really big thing that they did. And so that's why I think that and not only that, but they had a pretty diverse cast of characters. They tried to incorporate more than one black person, or they had more black actors on it, which I'm all for. Versus like the Star Wars series, even in the original trilogy, it wasn't that diverse of a cast. As iconic as they were, Lando being the only one and him being like a not great guy, kind of, Star Wars now is trying to aim towards more inclusivity, making an active effort to do that. But you can see in how the fans respond to a more diverse casting that Star Trek got them beat on the inclusivity award, because Star Trek fans aren't very pressed when they cast a black character in a role or they incorporate someone else's culture. But mind you, when Star Wars sees some darker skin, some melanated skin, oh baby, you're gonna hear about it. I remember making a TikTok about how it was like the dude that played Finn, no, not his name. Oh, I was right. John Boyega's Finn character, who played a stormtrooper man, baby. I made a TikTok video about that. They were pressed about him. And Jar Jar Binks that came before him, that like you couldn't even see that voice actor was black, but they knew when they were on that dude's butt. They were on that dude's butt. Like, so it's like Star Wars has a history of not being very inclusive. Like, they're very active and vocal when inclusivity is brought into the world, into their Star Wars world, which I'm like, sucks. But Star Trek, on the other hand, has been diverse, continues to be diverse, and it's not a big thing. From what I've seen, I haven't seen any really big. I mean, besides the interracial kiss, which happened in 1968, of course, people were going to be that's controversial. They're pressed about it. But like, since then, I haven't seen any real outrage about the diverse casting of Star Trek's characters. Not only that, I feel like Star Trek hits the head more when it comes to like social issues, social dilemmas. Like they, especially in their shows, even in their movies, um, they kind of get more realistic in their approach to things versus Star Wars is based in like a fascist like world and stuff, kind of emulating of maybe like um Germany during World War II, but their ideologies about approaching and tackling that situation don't come from a place of like realisticness. And I know it's like, oh, we're talking about space wizards. Why are you expecting it to be realistic? It's not that I expect it to be realistic in any capacity. What I expect though is that if they're going to tackle something like this or something similar to it, hopefully their approach to it makes sense. And I feel like Star Wars' approach doesn't always make sense. Like to quote a line from one of the sequels, which I know is well hated, but still to quote one of the lines from there, it's like I forgot what the character's name was, but she was like, it's not about losing or something, but it's like protecting what we love and stuff. And it's just like you're going against fascists. Like love is all fine and dandy, but I wish they would have like taken some more components of the prequels. And I know the prequels are also well hated, but I feel like them using kind of like the political ground for the prequels is interesting, and they could have kind of used some of that ideology to incorporate into their sequels about how people are using political means in order to achieve success. And I feel like that would be way more interesting than it just being like people sacrificing themselves and stuff. But I feel like, yeah, Star Trek wins the one on social issues. I feel like they handle it more, they handle it better, they handle it more realistically. And it's like, of course, they're based in space, so how realistic can it be? But like, I feel like when you handle certain issues or you're touching certain topics, there should be an air of realism around how you handle that topic. Like, say you're doing a fictional fantasy world and it's about around like the topic of slavery, and you're saying the slaves escape by being kind and generous. It's like, come on now, let's be so for real. Let's be so for real. It kind of removes you from the world, or at least it removes me. As it pertains to like emotional storytelling, I think both are really good in their emotional storytelling. But I feel like Star Trek, when it comes to emotional storytelling, like it has stakes to me personally, because I remember like they were not afraid to kill in the show, less so, but in the movies, they were not afraid to kill off some people. I mean, did the main group survive to the end? Yes. But also, like, people were dying left, right, and center. Like, I feel like, and they were willing to do more, sacrifice more in order for the the whole, the mass of like the ship to be saved and stuff. And I liked how it was like a community of people working and stuff. Versus like Star Wars, it kind of has that, like in this original trilogy. It definitely has that. It has the emotional storytelling down packed. But I feel like in the prequels, less so. And then in the sequels, I feel like they were so reliant on trying to get the fans to like the movies and stuff that they didn't really lay into the more emotional components of the characters. But I think Finn was probably one of the best emotional characters of it. And they kind of shoehorned him into situations because of that. I feel like they didn't happen organically. Like I remember in spoiler alert, by the way, in like one of the movies, Kirk sacrifices himself. And I think it was the first movie of the series. And you don't know if he's dying at the end of this movie, but his sacrifice during that moment, how they play it, how they film it, how it's received, feels like they're making a sacrifice. Versus like in Star Wars, I never feel as though Rey is sacrificing herself for the greater whole, even though like you she's supposed to be the savior of the Jedi's and stuff like that. Like it never feels like she is a part of a community and she's willing to help. It kind of feels like she's there standing by herself. And at the end of the day, like she's going to come through, and she's not going to lose anything because of it, because they didn't spend any time really building those organic, feeling emotional strings. And like in the original trilogy, they definitely did that more with the character building and stuff like that. And you were able to feel more of that sacrifice. They did do that really well in the original trilogy. But the prequel and the sequel, no, no. Also, let's talk about the Anakin in the prequel, how he just killed them children. It's like that came out of nowhere. Like, yeah. So I feel like when they try to do more emotional beats, or whether the character's going bad to good, Star Trek does it in a way that's like more realistic or reflective of people. Like I like a lot how they did Kirk and Spock's friendship. I feel like that was an organic way. So like when they go through things, obviously, even though they don't always see eye to eye, and they probably don't see eye to eye for majority of any of the movies or any of the TV shows really, you're still able to see that connection, and so it feels like a real group. Like I like when movies, shows spend time with the world building, but also spend time with kind of establishing the characters' connections. Because if you don't establish the characters' connections and then something happens to that character, how are we supposed to feel anything for them? We don't feel connected to them. And so I definitely feel more of a connection between the Star Trek, any of the Star Trek iterations versus the Star Wars ones, where it's kind of like they're less of a community and more of an individual. You know, another reason I think Star Trek is better is because they don't rely on past content as much. Like, I know in Star Trek, they bring back old Spock and stuff, but I feel as though it's done in a way that way makes way more sense to me personally, because it's not like, oh, like it's Spock, like, and he's like a big component of it, but he's kind of like a guiding voice, guiding wisdom that kind of gives little tidbits. I like how they do him. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I like it that he's from the future, so he knows some of the things that could happen, and he tries to do his best, because at the end of the day, the people on the ship is his family, so he's going to try to protect them. And then the fact that it kind of connects to the story as a whole, like it's not just like a one and done thing versus like Star Wars, like they are solely dependent. Like, it's not the original trilogy, because obviously not, but the prequel was very dependent on certain characters, less so, but like it's still dependent on using some of the stuff that was established in the trilogy as this, which makes sense because it's a prequel, so they're going to have to lead up to what's going to happen in the original trilogy, which is why I think prequel shouldn't be made after original, because then you're going to have to try and hand over fist make it work and try and build those things like Padme and Anakin, like their story in the prequels. I was like, I know that they have to get together, but the way in which they kind of shoot the horn them in, I was just like, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. But especially in the Star Wars sequels, oh my God, man, they were so dependent on it, on past stuff. Like they couldn't let the movie breathe without past stuff happening. And it's like, it's fine if you're making a sequel like years after the original or even the prequel came out. So I get that you want to connect it back to those things to remind people like, oh, this is the franchise you're watching, but they're so dependent on it. Like the story cannot go without them using or referring or referencing something that's happened in the movies that came prior to it. And it's so frustrating to watch. Like I liked Luke and the sequels, but the way he goes down, I'm like, just his storyline. And I wish I would have developed his storyline more. Like, if you're going to bring him back, just develop the storyline with him, because his storyline was pretty interesting in the sequels. Or like Leia, like they were so bent on having Leia be in that last movie, even after the actor who played her had passed, was ridiculous. Like, let that lady rest. Like, you don't have to be so dependent on a certain character that even when the actor dies, you have to use them. I'm like, let that lady rest in peace. Like, let's not. I was not a fan of that at all whatsoever. Did they put her to rest in the movie? Yes, but I was just like, oh my God, like, and it's just like a whole bunch of other references. Like I feel like if they would have tried to make the own movie and happen to have a reference here, a reference there, would have been good. But the fact that it was like so dependent on it made it frustrating to watch. Because did I love the original trilogy? Yes, absolutely I did. I wouldn't be making a YouTube video about why both are good, but Star Trek is better, without actually enjoying the movies. But I'm just like, at that point, it's like, come on now, like let the thing breathe. Not to mention, I feel like when it comes to new outlets of like the Star Trek franchise versus the Star Wars franchise, I feel like Star Trek does more to not be relying on past stuff. Like I feel like they're trying to do different things. Like I know they came out with two more shows, one's animated, one's not. I'm pretty sure both are comedies, if I recall correctly. I think both are comedies. But I'm like, that's fun, that's different. Like before they were like super serious space kind of dramas, or like sitcom in space type energy, maybe a little bit, but it was like a deeper thing. And then the movies were serious, but they had some comedic characters, comedic timing, and so now they're kind of switching to comedy, and I'm like all for it, do something different. And I'm like, the Star Wars, they're also doing different stuff, but I don't know. I've seen that they're coming out with a new show. They've come out with at least 4 new shows, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay, so there's and Sokka. I feel like I should know how to say her name because Ashoka. There's Ashoka, Andor, Mandalorian, Bad Batch, Jedi, Tales of the Jedi, Kenobi, Star Wars Visions. So all those shows have come out, and I feel like, oh, that's kind of a lot. That's kind of a lot. Because I feel like another thing is because Star Wars is under the Disney domain now, it's like Disney doesn't know when to let their franchises breathe ever. So they're gonna keep pushing out Star Wars content until it becomes so oversaturated that people are tired of seeing it. I know I'm tired of seeing it. The way they handled the sequel trilogy was so bad that I was like, yeah, and that's gonna be a nip in the bud for that series. And they're still coming out with shows over it. And it's like they might even produce good shows from it. Not all those are going to be good shows the way Disney be doing it, but they're probably going to produce a good show. No one's going to see it because they're tired of seeing all the bad ones, or because Disney doesn't really care about making organic, authentic Star Wars stories. Versus Star Trek, they're only coming out with a couple things here and there, and it's not like oversaturated. Like I keep seeing Star Wars shows coming out. I don't see Star Trek as much, and I kind of like that because it's like it gives the series breathing room. Like they did a movie a couple years ago, then it's a little show here, a little show there, and that's it. Versus Disney, I think they produced a Star Wars show multiple within a year and multiple back-to-back years. And it's like, let it go. I think that's another reason that contributes to why Star Trek is now becoming looked fondly upon rather than Star Wars, is because Star Trek isn't under Disney, and Disney is a domain in which does not know how to effectively do their franchises a justice. So they push out this garbage content that the fans watch because they adore the IPs, but then it's like, since it's not authentic, it's not made well, and it's being pushed out and stuff like that. It's like in turn you're making that whole franchise look worse. So it's like, why would I want to watch this knowing full and well that it's not going to be in the quality in which I want it to see? Like I feel like after the original trilogy, Star Wars has been going steadily downhill in the content they produce. And it might have a banger here and there, but it's just like at this point, it's like it doesn't matter if they have a banger. It's so much. It's so much that it's like it's overwhelming. That's another reason I'm like, movie fatigue, show fatigue is a real thing. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm like so fatigued, but it's just like after a while, you don't want to watch something that's being pushed on you over and over and over again. I feel like that's the reason why Marvel is starting to lose some big time money with the movies they're producing. And if they don't make a switch, they're going to be in a deep hole. But I'm going to make a YouTube video on that as well. But I feel like Disney pushes the content of their stuff so bad that it's hard for people to want to watch it anymore at this point. And Star Wars is a recipient of that, unfortunately. But yeah, I feel like going through all those things, still hearing them saying them out loud, I feel like Star Trek is the better franchise. Are they different? Yes, because Star Trek is more of a space odyssey type franchise versus Star Wars, which is more of like a space wizards type thing. And one's like Star Trek's trying to like fix the world, help the world. Star Wars is more like combating an evil empire. So it's different. And is it fair to compare them? No, not really, but kind of yes, because they're very close, I would say. But yeah, Star Trek eats down. So don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know. Do you think Star Wars is better? Do you think Star Trek is better? Which one would you prefer to see more of? If you had a choice to improve one, which one do you think needs the most improvement? And if it needs improvement, why? Let me know. Live long and prosper.